Welcome. My name is Mark O'Toole. I'm a member of Eric Moore and Associates Public Relations Practice. Today's webinar is titled Planning for Success Equals Healthy Marketing. Thanks for joining. Our presenters today are my colleagues Mary Owusu and Maggie Kutner. Mary is our Director of Analytics and created EMA's Success Plan platform to help companies tackle some of the largest marketing challenges, establishing clear goals for campaigns or entire marketing programs and then measuring them accurately. Maggie leads our healthcare practice. She works with the most recognized brands in healthcare, inspiring unique ideas and approaches that bring those brands to life. We are a digitally integrated, independent marketing and PR agency, and you can find our 200 marketing and PR professionals in 5 states across 9 offices. We have 5 offices in New York, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and New York City. We're also in Cincinnati, Charlotte, Boston, and Atlanta, but work for clients around the globe and the country. Please follow us on Twitter at Mower Agency, and we're using 2 hashtags today, hashtag Healthy Marketing and hashtag Success Planning. Follow along, and of course, feel free to contribute to the conversation. Mary and Maggie will answer questions at the end of the presentation. Please use the Q&A module, which should be on your screen to the left, to ask questions. Hi there, Mary and Maggie.
Hi, Mark, and thank you all for joining us today. This is Maggie Kutner. As Mark mentioned, I'm an account supervisor and the lead of EMA's healthcare specialty practice. I have over a decade of healthcare marketing under my belt, both client side with the most recognized name in health insurance in the country, and then here with EMA. So able to bring a unique perspective to the companies that we work with and help them solve their healthcare challenges. And you may be wondering, what does it mean to have a healthcare specialty practice? Well, at EMA, it means that we have a breadth and depth of knowledge, insight, and understanding of the healthcare industry. We work with companies across many sectors of the industry to solve complex business challenges, whether it's from creating a CMS-compliant, fully integrated marketing and advertising campaign to communicating a sensitive issue surrounding data breaches or changes in executive leadership, or if it's to achieve business objectives to move the needle on lead generation and sales. We do it all at EMA, and we have a great bench strength of knowledge and experience across the healthcare industry.
And hi, everybody. My name is Mary Owusu. I am the Director of Analytics, and in that role, my main task is to lead conversations around what success looks like for our clients in terms of how we measure the performance of their marketing campaign or program. And usually we begin that process with something called success planning, which is what we're talking about today. And before we get into the details of what success planning is, we've been watching this relationship between marketing and measurement for a long time, and that's the main idea around success planning. And in the research that we've done over the years, we've been reading a lot of articles, and if you're someone who follows any of Google's several blogs out there, you might have caught a blog post that was just put out this past February about the love relationship between marketing and measurement. And what you see on your screen right now is an animated image that was a part of that article. And it was just a funny piece about the fact that marketing and measurement are finally getting over the hump, and marketing is putting a ring on it with measurement. It was just kind of funny from the people over at Google. But the main takeaway here is that Google and eConsultancy put together a group of marketers to try to get them to help these 2 entities understand how the world of marketing and measurement is either working well or where there are gaps or where there are barriers. And so anytime you've got a group of marketers together who are being surveyed, in the broadest way of categorization, all marketers fall into 2 main buckets. The first are mainstream marketers, and the second are leading marketers. Leading marketers are those who are very customer-centric, they're very cross-channel focused, and they also are all about data-driven marketing. These folks tend to be on the cutting edge of things. That's 25% of all marketers. But most of us fall into the second category, which is the 75% of folks who are called mainstream marketers. It's not that we don't want to be cutting edge, it's just that we have other things that we're doing and we will get there once we've got all the right pieces in place. So at one point in this survey, Google and eConsultancy asked these marketers, they said, what do you think is the relationship between marketing KPIs and the business that you are in? And what was found was that 95% of those leading marketers, these are the ones that are on the cutting edge, said that to truly matter, marketing KPIs must be tied to broader business goals. Now, for some of you, this must be, a no-brainer because maybe you're already doing this. You're trying to align your measurement and the things that you're doing to broader business goals. And so statistically, maybe these leading marketers, said Google and eConsultancy, have figured out how to measure this already, and maybe they're having some success. So leading from there, they asked questions around, well, when you do marketing, whether you're a leading marketer or whether you're a mainstream marketer, what kind of successes are you having at the corporate level, in terms of the business objectives being met? And they found that leading marketers were 2 times more likely to have significantly exceeded their top business goal. This is not their top marketing goal, it's actually the top organizational goal, right? So interestingly, just a couple months before this Google survey with eConsultancy, Forrester, the research company, also put out a survey of marketers and learned that those who link marketing metrics to business results were 3 times more likely to hit revenue goals than those who don't. It may seem like these leading marketers have it all figured out and, they're doing marketing well, they're meeting these business objectives, and everything looks great. But in actuality, when Google and eConsultancy put these groups together and asked them, what are your challenges between what you're doing, what you're working so hard to produce, and your effectiveness, in other words, your measurement, what they found was that across both groups, 61% of them said we struggle to access or integrate the data that we need. 22% said we don't even have the right tools. Forget the data, we don't even have a tool to pull data out of, and we don't have the right technology. And another quarter of the audience said they struggle to get buy-in and support from executives.
And you may be thinking, this feels really familiar, because we know in healthcare, it's an incredibly regulated industry that needs data to survive, that needs data and reporting to maintain revenue reimbursement, to report to the government, and to make sure that your systems are functioning as they should be. But how much of that data that your organization may have access to is really germane to marketing? You may know, if you're a health system, how many of your inpatient patients are ordering breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning. Does that help you solve a marketing challenge? Probably not. But what you'll start to see is that through our success planning discipline, we give you a mechanism to help address and solve for some of these challenges that we feel universally throughout healthcare.
Mm-hmm. And these stats we see here in these 3 bubbles represent the struggles from these marketers who were surveyed, but certainly from our conversations with the clients we've worked with, we heard some of these, they resonated. But we also wanted to hear more, what other struggles are out there being faced by marketers. So we turned to another research company. This time we looked at a survey from the American Marketing Association, Duke University, and Deloitte. And this survey is commissioned every year, and it's called the CMO survey. And we wanted to understand if there was something here that had to do with marketing, measurement, and analytics. Now, you can see from the tabs across the top there where you see marketplace and growth, et cetera, that those were all the different, I would call them, categories that they asked these marketers about. But you see the final one is analytics. And the question there is, when you say analytics, you mean measurement of performance of marketing efforts, right? So they wanted to understand, how do you go about measuring and assessing and putting budget against how you measure your marketing efforts? And one of the questions is what you see here on the screen. And this was, by the way, from February of this year, so just a couple months ago. What is your plan when it comes to spending marketing analytics? What percentage of your budget do you anticipate spending on the analytics side? You can see that across sectors and across firm sizes, you can see in the current column there, that's the current percentage of marketing budget that's spent on measurement, and in 3 years, the estimated spend. You can see that huge leap, probably 5 times what the number shows in most of these columns. So the takeaway here is clear. CMOs plan to spend more money on measurement in the coming 3 years. Then the survey went on to ask marketers, or these CMOs, to what degree does the use of marketing analytics contribute to your company's performance? And they were given a scale of 1 to 7. 1 being doesn't really contribute at all, and 7 being it contributes very highly. And you can see here that the respondents of the survey said it's modest, right? We think analytics or measurement contributes a very modest amount to the business performance or the company's performance. So not only is the response mediocre or middle of the road, but also see how steady it has been from August of 2012 up through February of 2017. So the question then is, if you're going to spend more money, and yet you think the contribution of that money is really little, then this model of spending more and getting the same is not sustainable, right? So what is preventing these CMOs from using marketing analytics more effectively and driving their organization as a result of it? And on the screen now, you're seeing some of the responses that were collected. So you see about 8% said they don't have the data when they need it, so it's a time problem. Another 9.5% said, when I get the data, it's so complicated, I can't even make sense of it. Some feel that the data is not sufficient in terms of the insight that it provides, so it's maybe reporting on followers on LinkedIn or something, but really, what does that mean for the business? It's not relevant to our decisions. And the 2 main buckets you see down below, people lack, or marketers, CMOs lack the people who they feel can really drive this analytics conversation, and they lack the process and the tools to get to insightful data.
Enter the success plan. If you need tools, if you need resources, if you need support to make your campaign as successful as it can possibly be, we offer up success planning as a viable solution. So let's define a success plan. It is a one-sheet roadmap that defines how any marketing project or campaign be meaningfully measured against business objectives. Let's just repeat that. Meaningful measurement against business objectives. So we're talking about the higher order of things. We're talking about business objectives that your C-suite, your board of directors, your executive leadership is probably focused on with laser-like precision. And this success plan offers you a one-sheet solution, a one-sheet tool that helps define objectives, strategies, and tactics all the way down to creative executions that are going to help you meet those objectives. So success plans specifically define what to measure and who is responsible for it, whether you are a marketing team of 1 or a marketing team of 50 with multiple agencies and cross-organization partners. You're defining who's doing what and who's owning it. It can also help you spotlight barriers to effective measurement and incentivize those other team members we were just talking about to care about resolving those barriers. And lastly, it really fosters collaboration across your marketing department, among and between functions, and with your external partners. If you want to succeed, it takes a village. And this is a tool that's going to help you bring that village together, secure the buy-in that you need, get those roadblocks out of the way so you can move forward and move the needle against business objectives.
Maggie, you don't know how many times I've been in a conversation with a client and I've heard, I just want other people to care about what I'm talking about because they don't realize that this actually impacts their division. It actually impacts customer service or it impacts operations, and it's just that shared purpose is missing. And so what this document does, it's actually not a fill-in-the-blank document, even though it's got places to fill in information. It is a nurturer of having dialogue with other folks in order to create a plan that everybody buys into. And so we're going to get into the details about each each step or factor that goes into the success plan. And just before we do that, on your screen is the face of a man called Avinash Kaushik, who is very well known in the measurement world, and he's by title an evangelist at Google. What a title to have, right? An evangelist at Google. A few years ago, he developed something called the Digital Marketing and Measurement Model and put it out there on the web. And what it was a model for aligning all the measurement that might be being done by an analyst to business outcomes. It was a 5-step model, and it did a very effective job. And what we did was we took what Avinash put together and really laid on a different lens around what we heard from our clients over all these years. We wanted to build in accountability because that's a huge piece to making marketing happen. We made sure that it had facets for online and offline campaigns. And also, we added a very radical portion to this idea of, measuring marketing and measurement, which was about, or marrying marketing and measurement. And that radical idea is, how do you bring in the technical folks and the creative folks who essentially have to create work that supports what you're doing? How do you get them to be invested and also to actually play critical roles to making your program successful? So what we've got is a 9-factor model. And it begins with the strategy team identifying the business objectives, the marketing goals that then ladder up to the objectives, the strategies, and then the tactics. So the blue steps you see there that we'll walk through are all pretty much Marketing 101 stuff that you'll probably say, yeah, we do this stuff. We do this all day long. Or you might be someone who doesn't, but we make sure that that is foundational first. Then the success plan shifts into steps 5 through 7, which are focused on analytics and measurement. So once we know what we're doing, how do we measure it? Where do we measure it? Who's responsible for it? How much of it do we want? All those things are done in steps 5 through 7. And then in the last 2 factors that influence successful marketing and measurement, we address the technical and the creative implications. All right, now we're going to go through this line by line now, and one thing I do want to say is that you're going to have the ability, if you're interested, to download a copy of the success plan, a template of it on your own if you'd like. So feel free to listen closely as we go through all these details about how you actually put this all together. So factor number 1 you saw was business objective, right? So some of you may be coming from a place where you have pretty structured processes around a CEO level person giving you some clear-cut business objectives at the beginning of any year or any fiscal. And you might be working in a looser environment where that doesn't really happen very formally. Either way, the key point is to make sure that before you figure out how to marry marketing and measurement and know that your measurement is going to actually ladder up to stronger and bigger and meaningful goals, that you have a real sense of what the business objectives are, okay? So step 1 is making sure you've got all the business objectives and you've picked the ones that you know marketing can move the needle on. You might have some objectives that are more related to operations or something. So pick 1 or 2, or actually we would pick all if we're actually doing a real success plan, and put them all in the document. So as an example of a B2C type client, an objective might be to increase revenue by growing patient census within the next 18 months.
Now, if you're listening to this example and thinking, this sounds like a scenario I'm very familiar with, and it's fraught with challenges because marketing isn't responsible for all of the drivers that are tied to patient census, this is a challenge. The success plan can help you navigate through that because it will clearly identify what facets of this business objective lie with a marketing initiative. As marketers, we don't have control over a lot of factors. If you're a health system, marketing can't control who is being hired and recruited on our physician staff. That could be a huge driver of patient census. So this allows for us to plan within reality and within the realm of influence that marketing can exude.
So the next step, following this example through, would be to identify exactly, as you said, the marketing responsible aspects of that objective. So the goals are the short-run, highly measurable aspects that fall within marketing's realm of responsibility. And in this case, we've identified 2 of them. So the success plan says, okay, I have spots for you to put these goals. What are they? You put in increase labor and delivery by 15%, and you also see that you can identify the target group for this particular goal, right? And here it's prospective parents. That's who needs to be talked to in order to achieve this goal. The second goal is to drive 500 new direct patient referrals into the outpatient clinic in this example. So the target audience here would be prospective patients and referring physicians, okay? Now, coming up with these things shouldn't be done in isolation, as I said, right? So it's not like you're sitting there and just jotting them in. And even if you do as a draft first, what I always say, Maggie, is to have a conversation with the people who play a role in this and just make sure that you've captured things accurately. Now, what we're going to do is switch gears and look at a B2B example. So let's suppose you're a vision insurance company, and your goal or your objective at the corporate level is to attain dominant share in that market across a particular geographic area, Chicago metropolitan, by onboarding 65% of eligible participants. Following with the same logic, you move then into the marketing goals that fall under your purview. And this is, one of them is to generate 1,200 new qualified vision care leads monthly. And because you know that you're not going direct to consumer, your target audience are the benefit buyers and the benefit brokers. Perhaps you also know that you've got a perception problem in the marketplace, and you know that you need to fix that with the brokers because they are middlemen. And so you want to target that group as the target for your goal number 2. You can see the percentages that popped up down below, 60% and 40%. These are weightings that you would give a goal based on its likelihood of moving the needle on the objective, the overarching objective. Now, this is not something arbitrary. We say that it should be based on historical performance. So if historically you've done a lead generation campaign and you found it to be highly effective, it makes sense to put a percentage that's stronger in that bucket than in the second one. Once there are percentages in place, it helps to drive conversations around level of effort, time, and budget that can support one goal or the other if you had to choose.
The other thing that's really valuable about going through this step of the process is that when you have those collaborative conversations with your partners across your organization, you understand pretty quickly whether the goals that you're setting are actually realistic and achievable, or if some serious right-sizing within your business needs to happen. So if we looked at goal 1, 1,200 new qualified leads monthly, you may get together with your director of sales and they may laugh you right out of the room saying that that's just not possible. That number of leads doesn't exist within this geography. And that's okay. You're discovering it early before you're putting time and resources and human capital against this step, and you're going to course correct. You're going to set a reasonable and achievable goal. Or maybe you're going to go talk to your CEO and say, we need more feet on the street if we're ever going to convert this many leads. So it opens the door for those conversations, and it can be really beneficial before you get too far down any one path.
And so taking that particular goal and working it down, what we're going to do is walk you through the other factors of the success plan, following through with this lead generation goal. So the next step in the success plan is to identify the strategies that will move the needle on goal 1. And these strategies are essentially the things you'll do, improve, and reduce. What are the actual activities you'll engage in order to drive that goal up? So by way of example, we've listed one here. You could have several, but one is leveraging digital channels to drive leads. All right, let's take that from here and move on to tactics. So what digital channels are you going to leverage in order to do this? And you might have other strategies that were more aligned with TV or radio or other channels altogether. But for the digital one, what's tactics? So here you can start to get into, well, what have we done before? What could we do differently? What partners do we have in terms of external partners or internal ones to support our digital marketing efforts? So by way of example, we've got here 4 tactics. One is email marketing, using our own team, trade media placements, paid social and organic search are also listed here. And you can see the accountability that it calls for in the plan, in the success plan, to make sure that you're indicating who is responsible for this tactic. So let's say your trade media partner has historically only done awareness campaigns for you, and you want them to help you meet these goals. then you'll go to them at this stage and say, I see you playing a role here. Do you do anything with guaranteed lead generation programs? That sort of thing is what is facilitated by having the structured plan in place. And with that, they can come back to you with a proposal or with some sort of plan around how they can support this. What happens next after you've got your tactics is identifying the most hyper metric to help you understand how you're performing against your goal. So the key here is a KPI is a metric that is completely agnostic to your industry. It's completely agnostic to what tool you have or don't have. It's only loyal to one thing, and that one thing is the goal that you have up above in step 2, which was around lead generation. So any lead generation program would need to measure leads by tactic, which is the total, which means the total number of leads by tactic, the rate or the conversion rate for each lead, and the cost per lead to make sure that you have effectiveness and efficiency being accounted for. The key here is that the KPI is agnostic to whatever your nuances are in your particular situation or what tools you have or what resources you have. Times when we've done success planning, we've had situations where the goal was around brand awareness, brand perception, demand generation, sales of products. And so the KPI changes drastically based on what your goals are.
And that's something I'm so glad you brought up, Mary, because we see this happen with a lot of our partners, that there are softer KPIs at play here. We're talking about brand measurement and perception and aptitude and awareness. And there's not as much of a smoking gun between I can track that I sent this email and it generated this many clicks and this many leads. So success planning is flexible in that it will still allow you to establish success metrics against campaigns that have those softer analytics tied to them, that have those softer metrics. It'll still work. And what also is important here is that this could be bubbling up to the top, that if you are running a brand campaign, if you need to change perception of your institution because you are neck and neck with big oil and how consumers perceive you, you need to have mechanisms in place after that campaign starts. You need to be thinking about where those perception metrics are today. So it gives you the opportunity to really have all your ducks in a row before you pull the trigger and move forward, going live with your campaign.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I'll tell you, steps 1 through 5, these factors that influence the success plan, they have to be rock solid before you move on to step 6. At the end of the day, if the business objective has shifted because of the environment, the economy, competitive landscape, and you've built your plan against that objective, if you build any other steps, they will all be flawed, and your campaign will just be it'll be destined to fail from the beginning. And so we say always that after you've done steps 1 through 5, if you find that you haven't been talking to anybody and you've sort of done it in a silo, this is now the time. Maybe you've got a draft and you wanted a draft first, and then you wanted to check in with folks. Makes perfect sense. But you always want to make sure that 1 through 5 are solid. Because what happens next is you'll then assign values to the KPIs that you set in step 5. So your KPI values are a huge factor in your success, in the success of your campaign or your program. And so the question becomes, well, you set leads, total leads, conversion rate, and spend as your factors or as your KPIs. So how many leads? What is a good efficiency rate? What is a good effectiveness rate? And so you would put into the success plan, well, for the email nurture program, we would anticipate 500 leads, a 5% effectiveness, and a $7 efficiency of spend. Where are these numbers coming from, right? That's the question. Of course, if you've done things historically, you will have some history to lay back on or to rely on. And so you would, in the rationale section of the success plan, type a quick sentence as you see down below where you'd say, well, we're expecting a 10% increase based on year-over-year performance and blah, blah, blah else that you might put. But in some instances, you may never have done this before, and so you know this is going to be something new. It's going to be the baseline campaign or year. We say in the success plan that when you're not sure, put in something that says, I'm not sure, right? So that you've got a placeholder and something to come back to as after the campaign is done or the promotion is over and you want to update the plan for your next iteration. what then happens is you have to factor in the tools and the reports that need to be generated to report against those numbers that you set in factor 6. So the key here is, well, where am I going to get the number of leads, the effectiveness of the leads, and also the efficiency of spend? Where do those numbers live? So step 7 allows you to do that. So in this case, we put as an example, well, if you just want to know total leads, you can easily pull that out of Google Analytics if you're running that on your site, and if your site is where you're driving people to convert. And specifically, you would pull the campaign report segmented by source and medium, and the person responsible is one, right? So you indicate in the success plan who's responsible. But also there's this, remember the goal said qualified leads and also new leads. So how do you vet a lead as qualified or new? Google Analytics doesn't tell you that. So perhaps you don't have a tool for lead qualification. And so you literally would put in this document to be decided a tool that measures this, right? So the success plan allows you the space and the voice to be able to put this to writing against that goal.
And if you think about a real life example, perhaps you're working on a campaign or developing the strategy behind a campaign, and you realize you don't have a tool to measure lead qualification. It becomes that much easier to manage up, to go back to that leadership team who has set the business objective and say, I want to help you meet this business objective. Marketing is ready. We're putting together our plan, but we're missing a piece of the puzzle. And if we want to be as successful as we possibly can be, we need your help, whether that's dedicating a resource, allocating more budget, or some other such solution to help get us there so we can reach this business objective. So I hope you can see, as we're taking you through this process, how this is designed to foster collaboration and give you the ability, empower you to go back to those invested parties to raise the red flag when you need to, so you're able to get the resources you need to be successful.
Mm-hmm. And this, by the way, works for big IMC campaigns and small itty-bitty campaigns like a website build or just a media campaign or something very small and short-term. You'll see here the next step is technical team. So now you've talked to the strategist, or maybe you are the strategist. You've talked about analytics, you've talked to folks, or you are the analyst as well, and so you've talked to yourself and you've put those figures together. And then now you're shifting to the technical stuff that needs to happen in order for you to measure that lead generation goal. So as an example, let's suppose your campaign was meant to drive people to a particular website. Here's where you might say, track valid submissions of the lead form, because you know the form lives on your site. And I want to make a point about the valid submissions, because I can't tell you how many times a website is programmed to report number of people who submit a form. But anytime you click on that button to submit, really what's happening is the analytics tool is picking up that the lead has been submitted, when in reality, maybe clicking that button generated an error message because somebody left a field blank, right? So you want to have the submissions be valid. In other words, the person tagging your site needs to make sure that only reports when the form is submitted successfully and not just when the button is clicked. Perhaps you also know, because you're doing this on a one-sheeter, to go and take a look at your phone and see that the lead form actually doesn't look very good on a device, like a mobile device. So you make a note in here, make lead form mobile friendly. And perhaps, as Maggie, as you said earlier about talking to the salespeople, because you're involving them, maybe you had a meeting with the director of sales or the manager of sales, and they said, you know, every once in a while somebody calls and says, I looked at your demo and it was really cool, and that's what made me do A, B, or C. And then I know as an analyst, I would look at that person and say, wait, people call you after looking at the demo, and do you track that call anywhere? And so if those things have bubbled up as a result of doing the success plan, in this example, we put acquire a trackable phone number for use on the website. Perhaps that phone number is itty-bitty at the bottom of your website pages as opposed to being prominently placed. It's really key. Statistically, the call attribution company Dialogue Tech has put out a study where they found that people who call are 10 times more likely to convert to sales or to revenue than those who fill out a form. So your phone number is really critical, especially if you are in the kind of situation where somebody might call as they're making their decision. What happens next in the success plan is it opens the door for creative requirements. All right, so here you would be able to institute any implications on the user experience that need to be in place as well in order for your KPIs and your KPI values to be met. And as an example, maybe that phone number thing lets you realize that your phone number needs to move up and be more prominent and be global across all pages. And so you call this out to your person who's your creative person, in this case, Abdul, and you say, can you please make the phone number more prominent? Can you please design a mobile-friendly lead form? And this is something that you would sit down with him as well as you would sit down with the technical folks and say, here are the couple that I've come up with, but based on everything else, the goals, the KPIs, what else do you think we could do better on our website, in our mobile app, on our social networks, wherever you're driving people to, in order to make this all successful? In terms of where the success plan lives. So essentially, after you've done all those steps, you've got this one thing that really works best when it happens early on before you launch your campaign, and that defines what your KPIs are. It gives action items for your creative team, your technical team, and you also, by the way, get budget estimations from them at that stage as well. How much time is it going to take to do that? How much money? And you've got alignment and collaboration across the people at the most senior levels of the organization and also the people down maybe under you who are actually executing the work. With that all in place in this one document, you get everybody in a room, you work through the success plan one more time to get everybody nodding their heads, and you say, okay, now we can commence the campaign. And that's when you then hit the ground running with the campaign itself, reporting at the end of the campaign and also middle of the campaign to just make sure that you're tracking against your KPIs.
So you might be thinking, we just kicked off a new fiscal year and we're already into a campaign. Our strategy and our planning, it's done. How could a success plan possibly help me? Well, the answer to that question is the discipline behind success planning and this one document is that you have the opportunity to go back and look for areas of improvement. You may have a campaign that's underway and it's doing okay. You're generating leads. You're starting to move the needle, but maybe it could be doing better. Maybe by going through this process and bringing this discipline to bear on the strategy you've already put in place, you can identify some areas for opportunity. Or you can go back to that leadership team and say, we found something. If you can give us an extra $10,000, an extra $50,000, we can really blow this up. And you may also be wondering, maybe I'm a really small one-person team. How can this help me? Is this going to be flexible enough? Is this just going to be another thing that I have to add to my to-do list? Well, if you're thinking that, I'm happy to share some examples with you. So in this first example that we have of where success planning was really beneficial for a partner, we're talking about a hyper-focused audience. We're talking about a single county, but we're also talking about a very long period of time. So let's look at the goals and the strategy that went into making this campaign successful. We have that hyper-local audience, and we have a provider of very specialized care, and they were struggling with patient census. So we worked with them to identify what was happening. We knew that they enjoyed very strong brand awareness and brand recognition, but where they were faltering was the understanding in that key audience of what am I supposed to do? So we worked to identify really 3 key groups that we needed to do something: physicians, patients, and caregivers. And then once we identified those audiences, we were able to put levers in place that gave them the information that they needed to make a decision and take an action in a way that was easily accessible for them and in a format that they wanted. But as we were going through this discipline, what we found was that there were 2 tertiary audiences that were still important to this organization, but they didn't need to be priority number 1, and that was volunteers and donors. So in working with this partner to refresh their brand, and to rebuild their website, we used the success plan to guide our process. And what kind of results did we have? Patient census tripled. Website traffic increased. They were getting more calls from their website, because we could track it, of physicians, patients, and caregivers referring into this organization. And now this is a marketing team of two. It was a two-woman show, and they were wearing all of the marketing, communication, digital hats within their organization. And we became an extension of their team to help put this into action. So that just sort of speaks to how this can be a very scalable tool based on the size of your team and the size of your project. So we have a second example we want to take you through. And this really focuses more on some of those user experience and creative elements that we touched on in the success plan. But this was an organization that had a totally different challenge from the previous example. It's an international manufacturer who enjoyed really strong brand recognition in Europe, had really great product sales in Europe, but they needed to break into North America. And they had a couple challenges. They didn't have good brand awareness, and as a result, people weren't inclined to buy their product. Nobody knew who they were. So we worked through the success plan, and when we got down to those user experience and creative elements, we identified some things very quickly that could start to move the needle. Having a dedicated landing page that was created and specifically enhanced for mobile. So we knew that we could be pointing people to where we wanted them to go. We knew we could give them the information that we wanted them to have. We had to marry print tactics and offline advertising into this campaign. Because let's face it, offline and above-the-line advertising, they're not going anywhere. They can be kind of hard to track sometimes, especially if you have really specific metrics you're trying to hit. So every print piece had a vanity URL. We could track it. We knew what was happening. When we were pushing people to case studies, again, it was trackable. We knew who was downloading. We knew who they were. We had the ability to follow up with them. And then campaign-specific trackable phone numbers, I don't know if you can sense the pattern here that everything is trackable, became very important as we moved into execution. But the other thing that really worked here was that there were multiple parties involved in this campaign. We had our partners and their internal team, and there were other agencies who were working in collaboration with us to make this happen. And now this was a hyper-focused 3-month campaign, and these are the results we had. Nearly 2 million impressions. 95% of the people who were visiting our landing page were in North America. We were hitting the right audience. They weren't coming in from Europe or from other continents where this particular partner has an audience. We had 149 lead form submissions. But the stat that I really love here is that we had a 4% conversion rate. If you're looking at normal B2B benchmarks, we're right about 1%. You can feel good about your campaigns if you're hitting that 1% conversion. We're having a 4% conversion rate, so we're really, really proud of that. But the other thing that's great about the page that you're seeing right now, this is part of the report that's generated after a campaign that's gone through the success planning discipline can provide for you. So you can have, again, on one sheet of paper to hand back up to your leadership team, this is what this campaign has done for us. We know we are competing for budget. We know as we become more regulated in the healthcare industry, as there's more legislation coming down or not coming down, that's going to change the way that we need to do business, we have to play defense for our marketing dollars. And having reports like this that are tied to those tangible success metrics can make it that much easier for you to defend your budget and maybe even earn a little bit more budget for your next campaign.
Mm-hmm. I love the phone calls on this page, Maggie. When we pulled this report, we not only could state the number of phone calls, we could go deeper and see exactly what those phone numbers were. There were 3 digits that were encrypted, but you could see the last 4 and the first 3, and you could then go to your sales team and say, this number called on this day at this time. They came in through social. They came in through organic search. And you could really be able to tie this back to a qualified lead within a sales system. And I should also say that the snapshot report is one part of a much, more detailed report. Obviously, it'd be great to have a nice snapshot like this to hand over to the executives and then say, oh, you want to know more about the phone calls and which area codes called us more? I've got that report for you as well as a backup here. So we've walked you now through the full success plan, and I think one of the biggest marketing problems that it solves for is it basically becomes your voice for breaking down these barriers that we talked about earlier, right? The data, is it enough? Is it too much? Is it timely? Is it not timely? Who's responsible for it? Do I have the right tools or not? Do I have buy-in? And all the other things that we discussed. Essentially, whether you're a leading marketer or you're like the rest of us, a mainstream marketer, this essentially solves for that challenge that we go through around defining what to measure and who's responsible for it, spotlighting the barriers to effective measurement and incentivizing other people to care about what makes marketing work and work well for the benefit of the company, and also fostering conversations and collaboration across departments and teams. So remember those two statistics that we started off sharing with you about how these leading marketers who are able to do this successfully were 2 times more likely to have significantly exceeded their business goals and were 3 times more likely to hit revenue goals. Well, there was one other statistic that was shared by the people who were surveyed with the survey done by Google and eConsultancy. And that's what you see here, that leading marketers were also 2 times more likely to say that they have a powerful role in setting corporate strategy. I mean, can you imagine that? Setting corporate strategy. They're now at the table. So it's clear that how you define success also defines your efforts to achieve it. And over the last 15 years or so, the digital evolution that's happened has really just reoriented the way that we communicate with our customers, and everything's really shifted. And marketing has now had to shift from relying on arcane metrics that didn't resonate with the C-suite. And so a measurement approach that really centers on business outcomes helps marketing to take a more central role in steering the organization. So we like to say that when it comes to the marriage between marketing and measurement, that really there's a third wheel at play. And that third wheel is a plan and a structure for dialogue around all the pieces that need to be in place for your plan, your project, your campaign to successfully work. Instead of being really possessed with KPIs, we find that being obsessed with success is far more rewarding. And I know that most of us work pretty hard to build measurement metrics into our IMC plans or to our short-term campaigns. But the problem is, is it the right data? Is it timely? Is it accessible when I need it? Do I have buy-in? Do I have the right tools or the right people?
And that's where we see Success Plan as just being a multifaceted solution that you can bring to bear. It's a discipline that has a rigor to it that allows you to engage, again, those cross-department teams. Maybe the web team doesn't report to you. Maybe they're outside of your sphere of influence. This is a way to bring them in, to get that engagement up and down the food chain so you can manage up to your leadership and have them nodding their heads when you have that 5 minutes of their time to bring them on board to your plan. And it also brings everybody together at the same table. So we invite you, go to mower.com/healthy-marketing, download this template, plug in the plans that you're working on today into the template, have these conversations, foster the collaboration, bring people together to really up-level your campaigns, because we are talking about healthcare. We want to see healthy campaigns that have strong outcomes that are good for our bottom line. So again, we would encourage you to visit mower.com/healthy-marketing so you can see this tool and give it a try for yourself. And with that, we would love to answer any questions you have.
Very good. And we have a couple of questions in the queue. If you have additional questions, audience, please add them to the portal. Mary and Maggie, the first question is, how much does a success plan cost?
I knew we were going to get this question, and I'm glad for whoever asked it. We mentioned that success planning is a really flexible tool. So you're going to see a range of investment level that's kind of commensurate with the size of your plan and the size of your initiative. We could be looking at a relatively low four-figure investment if you have that hyper-focused, hyper-local, short-term campaign. If you're talking about your IMC plan, that's maybe an 18-month initiative, we could be looking more into the five-figure range of a plan. So it's really flexible depending on the size and scope of your need and your project.
Great, thank you. One additional question. How long does a success plan take to complete?
I can take this one. So that also is very flexible based on the size of the plan that we're building for. We find that when it's an IMC type program that we're building the success plan around, that can take anywhere from a month to a month and a half to complete a success plan, only because there are conversations that need to be had with other agencies, or we sometimes are involved in discussions within the organization itself. So we're setting up meetings with the CEO or the director of sales or customer service, and we're talking with the digital agency or the analytics team and things like that. So that could take 4 to 6 weeks. On the lower end, where it's just a project and we're just knocking something out, we see that can be turned around in a matter of just a couple of weeks.
Great. Another question just came in. Can you explain the two types of marketers in more detail?
Sure, that's a great question. So in the broadest categorization, marketers all fall into mainstream marketers and leading marketers. The leading marketers tend to be the ones who are very much about attribution and contribution. That's the most, I think, best way to define them, right? They're all about, how do I tie in my offline with my online? How do I know when somebody stops looking at my website on their phone and looks at it on their computer that they're the same person? How do I know when somebody comes to my site whether my TV ad influenced that decision and therefore give TV the credit that it deserves? So that's all attribution and contribution. And so leading marketers are very much all about the data-driven. Every decision is, what's the data to support it? How do we know it works? How do we know it won't work? Very customer-centric, so about the single user as opposed to looking at aggregates of information. They want to know how individual A was convinced or can be convinced to make a decision based on their behaviors. And they also tend to be very much about across device, so how do we know when somebody moves from one device to the next or one channel to the next, what is motivating them to make their decisions and what's shifting them from one channel to the other, whether it's our messaging, a competitor's messaging, or the marketplace at large. And mainstream marketers, as we said earlier, are the rest of us, 75% of us, who are trying to get there. We just are doing marketing as usual right now. We're just kind of taking the data we have, and we're not pushing the needle too much on what's bleeding edge. We very much want to get there, but we just aren't there yet.
Great. Thanks, Mary. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. We'll post this webinar to our website, www.mower.com, and we'll share a link to access it once we have it up on the site. Mary and Maggie, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, we thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate that success looks different across our industry, whether you're trying to interact and engage with patients, generate leads, change brand perception. Success is a moving target. And that's why we wanted to generate a tool that was really industry agnostic and campaign agnostic that could help you achieve those bigger, higher level business goals. So we hope that you visit us at mower.com/healthy-marketing to download a template for yourself today. See how the tool works, put it into practice, reach out to us with any questions that you may have. You see my email address there up on the screen, mkuffner@mower.com. We want to see you succeed in your campaigns, and we hope that this is the tool that will help you have the healthiest campaign possible.
Great. Thanks, Maggie. That concludes our webinar. And again, thanks for joining today.